Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
Hi, it's me, Egbert, E-G-G-B-U-R-T, the owner of this radio station. I invite everyone to listen, no matter if you're young, old, black, white, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, heck, I even want real estate agents listening to my station. Yes, even Rick and Tracy. You're all welcome. Now, it's back to my Goodwill ambassadors, Brad and John.
You know, that's a heavy title we get hit with at Goodwill Ambassadors. You and I have to keep our, noses clean and stay, focused straight ahead and be sort of that role model type, right? As ambassadors.
Whoa, no, wait a minute. It's capital G for Goodwill, my favorite store, right? I thought that was the assignment. Did I read that wrong?
I'm not a Goodwill guy. I'm a Salvation Army guy.
Oh, really? Is that true? Do you find, jokes aside, Brad, do you find a difference between the inventory?
No, I find a difference in the corporate structure. That's what I.
Oh,
see.
Okay. So in other words, your dollar is better spent not in terms of what you get for a value or choice, but where the money goes. You're more comfortable with Salvation Army than Goodwill.
I have an issue which I think is becoming a real problem in my mind, and I'll just be honest with you and come right out and say that I question the validity of a lot of the not-for-profits. I think that some of them are, you see these stories all the time, and like perfect example, one of the ones that, and I will be honest with you, one of the ones I used to be a member of, the National Rifle Association.
Yep.
I mean, they have, it's been proven in court, these guys, Wayne LaPierre, was just abusing, the average Joe and Josephine who sent their money to the NRA because of the fact that you wanted to protect your gun rights. Well, and Wayne LaPierre's flying around his private jet, and he's got this, and he's
the trappings of the position.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess what bothers me on this is, I'll give you a perfect example. Maybe I won't. I won't go there.
Maybe not. I don't know what it is.
Well, no,
if you have trepidation in your voice, Brad, I have a feeling you shouldn't follow through. Isn't the executive compensation thing, and I'm not an expert on this, but isn't that what brought down Susan Komen? Didn't that result in the declining popularity of the whole Susan Komen operation?
Well, there's so many of them like that. I mean, the one that I saw the other day was the guy who runs the ASPCA makes $1 million a year. And I saw that. I thought to myself, I don't know if this is true or not. I did some research. Sure enough, it was correct. Somebody posted on one of the Facebook pages that I looked at that said that if you are a pet lover, don't send your money to the ASPCA. Send your money to the local shelters.
And you can make the same argument about HSUS, couldn't you?
What's
the Humane Society of the United States. Like, if you want to help an animal shelter, give it to the place on Mid-Rivers Mall Drive. Don't give it to a national Humane Society of the United States.
Well, I'll make the one step further. I say don't give your money to the Humane Society of Missouri. How about that? I mean, because of the fact that, there's a building right there at Page and Page Service or Page and Shoots. I think it's Page and Shoots. I guess it's Page and Shoots. Yes, right at Page and Shoots. That's probably, $10, $15 million building, and to the point where it's like, okay, so why do you have to have, and architecturally, you drive by, it's a very pretty building. It's got all sorts of neat stuff on the sides of the building. It's a, expensive piece of real estate right on the corner of Page and Shoots. I mean, why do you need that? And once again, to me, it's to the point where it's like, people make fun of Walmart, but I can remember a friend of mine used to be a sales rep. I can't remember what company he worked for. And he talked about the fact that one of his clients he was repping some kind of product or something like that. And he would go down to Bentonville, Arkansas to essentially pitch this to the buyers at Walmart. And he said that most of the time he'd go into these buyers' offices and they had a very minimalistic office, concrete block walls. And he says, and a couple of the buyers, they literally sat on lawn chairs. Okay, so as opposed to offices where what's the real expensive line of office furniture? Was it Herman Miller? Is that the one that's?
It's something that I've never sat in before, Brad.
Well, but I mean, it used to be.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, a Herman Miller chair. Yeah.
Right. It used to be and the chair was like $3,000 or that kind of stuff. And I'm going like, I don't get it. See, my whole thing is, I don't understand why, and this is maybe, to the point where I'm not a flashy kind of guy. I don't drive a flashy car, that kind of stuff. I don't understand why the not-for-profits, like, for example, there are several not-for-profits that have their headquarters in Clayton, Missouri. Okay? Why Clayton? Why not Shrewsbury? Or why not Florissant?
Now, to play devil's advocate, I could see why Clayton would make sense in the 1980s if you had a ton of paperwork to file with the court and you or with county government. If you had to file documents every day and you didn't want to pay a courier service, then get a small office in Clayton. In the modern digital era, you have no reason to be close to a government office.
Well, look at the situation for attorneys. Exactly right. The reason why all the attorneys were headquartered, or a lot of them had offices in Clayton, is because they have had to file everything paper-wise. If you're filing a lawsuit, right, you have to walk down to the court building clerk. You have to go up to the third floor, whatever floor it was in the St. Louis County office. You brought in your 3 copies. They'd timestamp all 3 copies. They would keep one. You'd keep another. Send it to the whoever you're suing, stuff like that. Not anymore. The attorneys can file stuff at 3:00 in the morning in their pajamas or in their underwear,
less, Brad.
or less. And because of the fact that what's that done to office space in Clayton? I mean, look at downtown St. Louis, where the AT&T building is. Technically, back in the day, that would be an ideal situation for a lot of businesses that had government in dealings, because you're down the street from all the court buildings, But not anymore.
And look at, as an example, too, let's use the old Monsanto campus. Imagine what the company could have got, even immediately after being acquired by Bayer in 2018, what the company could have got for that office space in 2019 versus what they have to sell it for in 2024. You sell it for a song. Nobody wants office space anymore.
Well, I don't know. The crazy thing is that you see this kind of stuff all the time. There's an interesting story that I read about Oprah changes narrative and why she left Weight Watchers board. Doesn't mention lying. Do you know the whole?
Was it because she's paid by Ozempic and she doesn't have to exercise anymore?
Well, see, one of the things that bothers me the most is hypocrisy. And if someone, if you're going to live by the sword, I say this all the time, live by the sword, die by the sword. If you say, and it's the crazy stuff about you go back and you go back the ultimate situation. And I don't know if this is being taught in journalism schools nowadays, but I think the Gary Hart presidential campaign.
Gary Hart and monkey business.
Right, is the perfect example of a time when things change, because of the fact, if you know the whole crazy story, Gary Hart was rumored to be having an affair with a young lady, and in a press conference, I believe it was a press conference, this was brought up, and he said, "That's not true. If you don't believe me, just follow me." So he threw down the gauntlet, and I believe it was a couple reporters from the Miami Herald.
It was, yeah, because he had a boat down there. He had the monkey business down there.
Right. So they decided, okay, fine, we'll follow him. So they staked out his townhome in D.C., and lo and behold, a nice, attractive young lady shows up at his house like on Friday at 7 o'clock and doesn't leave till Sunday morning at like 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning. I don't know which one it was. And so in other words, he said it and he got nailed. And how many times, nowadays do you hear this crazy thing where you hear people, politicians say things and go like, I don't know.
So the local example of this, Brad, as of last summer?
Well, there's been a bunch of them. I mean, the 3 guys that got caught, the St. Louis Board of Aldermen, Louis Reed.
Hold on. Let me interrupt. I that's a great example. But also I forgot George Peach was a good example.
Oh my God.
But I mean, that's a perfect example. Last summer, Tashara Jones, St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones, was on, I think she was on St. Louis Public Radio, and she said something to the effect of, it was about the Kim Gardner situation, I believe, and she was asked about it, and she said something to the effect of, gosh, I sure hope nobody sunshines my personal phone, So what did Mark Maxwell at KSDK and other reporters do? They sunshined a personal phone. Because if you have government conversations on your personal phone, they're sunshineable.
Right.
And Lord, was there a treasure trove of conversation on that phone.
And you know what's funny about that? What's funny about that is I heard Jane Duker talk about that on 97.1 and Mark Reardon's show. And she said, if you want the transcript, DM me on Twitter and I'll send it to you.
Because, of course, I know you can't imagine a St. Louis City government operation not executing at 100% precision, but they put a version of the text message conversation that was not supposed to be public online, and I guess Jane or somebody grabbed it and gave it to Jane, and then eventually St. Louis City government, maybe it was the courts, put up the abridged version of it, but Jane has the whole shebang.
And she sent it to me, and it was so fascinating. I mean,
was it good?
Oh my God, you read this stuff, you go like, I can't believe they're talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, these are the things that these are conversations that real people have. Now, imagine, Brad, let's go back to segment 1. Can you imagine if you wanted to call a close and loyal advocate of yours, an ally of yours, if you wanted to call them the sympathizer or you wanted to insult them, what if you got on the phone and you called your dad or you called your campaign consultant or you called somebody like that and you said it over the phone? You can't sunshine a phone call, can you, Brad?
Well, now there are, back in the day, go back to the Nixon tapes where they recorded all the conversations.
Right. And that was an anomaly.
Right. And
there's also a 23-minute delay because Rosemary's knee kicked the machine and somehow deleted it, right? Isn't that what happened? Isn't that the story?
Well, right now they're saying the same things happened with the January 6th. Now that the Republicans are in charge, the Republicans are going
some of it just magically disappears.
Right. Some of the testimony that was given by the Democrats, because remember, if you know the whole crazy story, none of the Democrats wanted to be on the January 6th thing. So it was all, none of the Republicans wanted to be on the thing. So it was all Democrats, with the exception of the two. Essentially, who people would call the Republican turncoats. Who was that? Was Kinzinger from Illinois, and
Adam Kinzinger,
and what's her name? Cheney from Wyoming or Montana.
Yeah.
So and now they're claiming the Republicans are claiming, okay, how come the hearing on this day, which was positive for President Trump, is now disappeared?
Of course, yeah. Let's go back to the Tashara thing real quick. Here's where I give KSDK's Mark Maxwell credit, because he was in the news the other day. We were talking about his conversation with Mary Elizabeth Coleman. And, Mary Elizabeth is an attorney, and if you have anything not completely buttoned up, MEC is gonna point it out to you, right?
Right.
What I give Mark Maxwell credit for, and it was apparent during the Tashara Jones controversy, because he was one of the guys that talked about the text messages that were sunshine. To his credit, I think Mark Maxwell doesn't care at all what people think about him. And I think he cares very much about what people think about the level of journalism and the work product that he produces. I think he cares about that, and I think he has real professional pride in that. I don't think that he cares at all if you're a supporter of Tashara Jones or if you're a supporter of Mike Parson. I don't think he cares about being liked by the political crowd, and I think that's an admirable thing for him.
Well, you're exactly right. As opposed to somebody like George Stephanopoulos, who obviously cares very much about what the political crowd thinks about him. And matter of fact, the interesting thing is, who is it he had on? He had was it last weekend?
He had was it Nancy Mace?
Yes,
Nancy Mace,
and she was talking about the fact that she'd been raped, and she just excoriated him. And the amazing thing was, let's go back to how we got George Stephanopoulos in the beginning. Do you know where his origins came from?
Well, he was a spokesman for Bill Clinton, yeah.
Right. He worked on the Bill Clinton campaign, and what did they have? There was a part of that campaign that was I always used to love this phrase, that was working on, remember this?
Was that the bimbo eruptions?
Exactly, bimbo eruptions.
Yeah.
All these women that were going to come forward who had, shall we say, trysts or one-night stands, whatever you want to call it, with Bill Clinton, and George Stephanopoulos was key in essentially trying to tamp down whatever they said, and even to the point where essentially do oppo research, so to speak, on them and say, well, what do you expect? She lied in third grade. She lied because the fact she said she had a dog. Go in
and that was the basis of the quote alleged, or the quote fiction movie Primary Colors, which was originally a book. George Stephanopoulos' book, by the way, which is called All Too Human, really, really good book. I'm not a Stephanopoulos guy. His book, when you look at the inner workings of the White House and how you tamp down a bad story, how you deal with Democrats who get out of line, how you deal with rogue Republicans and try to woo them, like All Too Human is a really good book.
Well, but once again, it's all about control behind the scenes, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And, that's a good example, too. And that goes back to the Clinton administration in the early days had no rapid response team, despite the fact that the campaign was always on the defensive. Once Clinton got into the White House, they had essentially no process by which they would come out with statements. So the example that Stephanopoulos gives is, at his first State of the Union, they didn't have the address. And, the teleprompter went off during one of his, I think it was that first one. They were still working on the State of the Union address when the president was headed to the Capitol. And the rest of the spokespeople who've done this before, like they called it bungee jumping without a rope. And that's what bungee jumping without a net. And that phrase has always stuck with me in communications, because it's like, not only do you have to craft a message, but you have to think, what are our opponents going to say? What do you say in response to that? What are they going to say in response to that? And on and on.
Okay, John. John mentioned to a person earlier that some people may not be familiar with. He mentioned George Peach.
Oh, yeah.
And the George Peach reference is interesting because George Peach was a blood and guts prosecutor for the city of St. Louis. And
he loved to get in those guts, didn't he, Brad?
Well, and his main thing was he was notorious for prosecuting sex crimes, prostitution, solicitation, all that kind of stuff. And he would go after the prostitutes and the Johns and charge them as much as he could.
Lowercase J, Brad. Lowercase J.
Yeah, not the capital J Johns, but the small Johns, essentially the Johns being the customers of the prostitutes. Okay. And so one night, I think it was out at the airport Marriott.
It was?
One night, St. Louis County was conducting a sting operation. They had a couple of their female detectives working undercover as escorts, and one of the female detectives gets dispatched to a hotel room at the Marriott. And what was his name? Was it something Johnson? He used the pseudonym or the false name.
I don't remember
of
that.
Something Johnson. I'll look that up. And the escort comes to the door, knocks on the door, and they essentially, conduct business. George Peach pays her, and then she pulls out the badge and says, "You're under arrest." So the hypocrisy was what he was against in the city, he was participating in the county.
Yeah,
so he didn't last
exactly.
too long. And the sad part of it was, I don't know if you know this or not, his daughter was in the radio business. I don't know if she's still in it or not.
I didn't know that, no.
Yeah, and I always felt sorry for her because of the fact that he moved out of the area. He moved totally out of the area. Matter of fact, lost his law license, got disbarred and the whole bit. And I thought to myself, I don't know. And see, that's where our Achilles heel is, I mean,
I get it. Hey, we're over time, Brad.
Our Achilles heel is, and more than our heel, right?
Hey, you're the one with the tawdry references. Tawdry Hepburn over there.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?